It's a beautiful winter day in late January, and boot camp just got over a couple of days ago, and here we are, and we're just going to run out to the greenhouse and we're going to check things out, and we're going to do a quick update of what's going on. We've been getting more small snowstorms, which is absolutely fantastic, because it's building up the snow supply, which is our irrigation water for the summer. So that's going to be... and I've still got my cough. Maybe I'll plop over dead one of these days. But that'll be okay, because there's plenty of videos on here for everybody to know how to grow food. I've already left a legacy, so everything from here on out is additional. All right. Boot camp was a raving success. I had 9 participants, which was just about the perfect number. We got our floating row cover. You can see here, it's covering. This came in the mail recently, and so we put it out here at boot camp so people could see how to do that. We've had 0-digit weather at night, and so all these seedlings here have been freezing a little bit at night. And there, you can see the frost damage on some of these leaves here, how they're curled and brown, because they came from the grow lights inside the greenhouse. I mean, inside the laboratory. I brought them out here. We transplanted a lot of these, but they are doing okay. This is just showing you that plants can freeze at night if they thaw out during the day. Now, there is damage on them, but they're not completely dead, and that's just something you have to accept as part of winter gardening. Here was our list of what we did for boot camp, which is pretty fantastic. We just went through each one of these. They were numbered from 1 to 28. I erased the number as we got it done, and so hopefully our people went home happy. They gave me raving reviews, which was fantastic. The temperature in here today is above 60. It's like 62 or 63 degrees. The worm bin's doing fine. And we've been eating lettuce out of here. The cabbage, the Chinese cabbage has been really good just as a lettuce green. Spinach, green onions, and we've been eating a lot of the shallot greens, which are right here. So they've been really yummy and good, and things like twice-baked potatoes and all that kind of good food. The experiment going on with these composts has been good. So this is just an update of some of the last videos that came out, which was a couple of weeks ago. But we got this first, we got this first one going about a week before boot camp so that it would be hot when boot camp came. And it was at 150 something degrees, like 151, 152 at the hottest. And this was done with a 13 or 14 bucket pile. And then this one was created with the amount of 10 buckets that we put in here. And today it's at 140 degrees. Try to get a close-up of this bad boy. So it's at 140. So this one is just heating up now, about 5 days after boot camp of when it was made. And this one, we turned it during boot camp. It worked out perfect because it had been at 150 degrees. I'm going to put this in here. It had been at 150 degrees for 3 days. But the real experiment here is how small... is how small of a pile can we make and still have these piles work to create compost. I've had a lot of people doing compost. The 3 big reasons that composts don't heat up in the first place, or they won't stay hot long enough, is that your moisture is too wet or too dry. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because your high nitrogen is not high nitrogen, or you don't have enough of it. The third reason is your total mass is not big enough. So with this experiment, I'm showing here, see, we're at 120 degrees. I've been checking this every day, and we've turned this once at boot camp, but it has never came up again to 131. So this is a failed pile. And I know my high nitrogens were good because it got up to 150, and it stayed there for 3 days. But now that I've turned it and mixed it all up during our boot camp class, now it has failed to grow, to come up in temperature again, and I think it's because the total mass of this is not big enough. So a lot of people, I think, have tried to make compost piles, but they're not big enough. So measure your compost in some kind of a measuring cup. A 5-gallon bucket is the perfect measuring cup. And it looks to me like these tiny piles of only 10 buckets of materials to start with is not big enough to keep it hot all the time. I mean, this has got up to 120, but it has not got up to our minimum of 131. So there's a little hot spot right there. I moved the temperature a little bit. I mean, the thermometer a little bit, and we'll see where it's going. So I checked this yesterday. Okay, we just hit 130. Hope you can see that. 130. So it is reaching the minimum temperature today. 132. Fantastic. So we're reaching the minimum temperatures, but what we're finding is with this recipe, once I turn it, it's not enough mass to keep it hot. So what are my options right now? Do I put this in the trash can and throw it away? Absolutely not. This is still good material, but I do have options. I can say this pile failed, so what do I do with it? We can just spread it out on top of the ground like a detritus sphere that we're planting into. See right here, see my baby lettuces over here? So here's my baby lettuces, and there's compost on top of the ground here that they're growing in. So we can spread it out 1 inch thick all over the ground. That would be a good thing to do with a failed pile. Unless it's full of weed seeds, and if it is full of weed seeds, we need to add it back into a compost so that all the weed seeds get super hot. And once we've composted a failed pile, then everything in the compost is considered a brown. So it would be part of your 60% materials. Because remember, when you make a compost, you have 10% high nitrogen, 30% greens, and 60% browns. So a failed pile is part of your 60% browns. Has this one failed? Yes, it has, because it didn't come up and stay up to temperature for a second turn. And you need a minimum of 3 turns. I like to have 5 to 8 turns to make sure the pile's good. And the reason the way to know, the way to control the turns is to, I'm saying it wrong. The way to control how hot it gets and how long it stays hot is how many high nitrogens you start with. So if you started with 20% high nitrogens, it would get hotter quicker, and your hot temperatures would be higher, and they would stay hot longer, like maybe 10 turns instead of 4 or 5. But see, 5 to 6 turns is just about perfect to make a really good compost. So having the extra high nitrogen in there is just more work. You have to keep turning it so it doesn't go anaerobic. And so you don't want too many high nitrogens. Plus, high nitrogens are hard to come by. And so you're wasting materials that you can make other composts with. So let's come back and check our temperature now that this thermometer has stabled in this new pile. We're at 138 degrees. So we have not reached the threshold of 150, but we did reach the threshold of 131. So if this maintains 131 for 3 days, because this is the first time it's hit 131, so it's above 131. So now I'm waiting 3 days. So tomorrow I'll check it, the next day I'll check it, and then the next day I'll check it. So if this is 160 tomorrow, we'll just turn it the next day, because 160 is our next threshold. But I doubt it will be with this tiny pile. So 10, 11, 12, 13 buckets of material to start with. I feel like that's too small of a pile to start with to make things work. What we want to do is have a pile that is more like a minimum of 40 buckets. So 45-gallon buckets. So that's a lot of material. Most of the piles I make are, I gather the materials in these blue tubs. These blue tubs hold 4 to 5-gallon buckets worth. And usually I have a minimum of 10 of those. So 10 times 5 is 50 5-gallon buckets. If they're a little bit shy, then it's more like, meaning not quite full, then it's more like a 40-bucket pile. But that is the normal size of a compost I do. Last year with my 17-week students, we would always double that, and we were making piles with 20 of these buckets. And it was a big pile, and it made a really beautiful, great, nice, big bunch of compost. The thing about the compost tumblers for home gardening is once you get done making it, first of all, it doesn't have all the microbes in it because the fungus doesn't grow right because you're always tumbling it. And then the second thing I don't like, you don't get any mass. You start with a whole bunch and then you get a half of a 5-gallon bucket. That didn't help anybody. So it's a joke. It's just a joke. It's a gimmick to actually produce a lot of compost. Hopefully this helps you to have a fantastic tiny compost pile that stays hot so that you can know that you need to make it bigger too. Seriously, hopefully this does help you with your gardens. Compost is complicated. And so I'm really hoping that this little conversation we've had today will help you to have a successful compost, because compost is one of the major tools. So important. So important.